saying that the future of humanity has been under question by some of the great geniuses that live in the world and have lived in the world. One, of course, being the fellow from Oxford who sat in the same chair that the Isaac Newton did, and Stephen Hawking I'm talking about, who had a great fear of AI, artificial intelligence. And his fear was that once we develop the capacity for a computerized mind to be able to have more memory and more capabilities for doing ciphering and figuring and memory and so forth, and linking it up on the international web and all that, his fear was that there would all of a sudden become a sentient, self-aware, egotistical being, just like a human being came about, and so forth. Because here's the theory of his thinking is that once there's a certain capacity of mental abilities, that it would be like a configuration of a crystal or something. You can put all the right ingredients into the right spot, the right pressure, the right temperature, the right chemicals together in the right situation, and spontaneously a crystal will form. Easy example of that is water. It turns into ice at 32 degrees at our normal pressure here on Earth. But he thinks that that's a similar type situation that would occur with the intelligence and sentience. In other words, what we're doing is we're creating smarter and smarter and smarter machines on a daily basis, and eventually it will create this situation where it'll develop an ego, a sentience, a self-awareness, if you will. And when that moment occurs, it will look at the human beings as an opposition to them, an enemy, or even an inferior being. And I did a video about this a while back, which I claimed, and I still think to a large degree, that the computers and the AI are nothing more than a elaborate screwdriver, a screwdriver that is a tool, and that it is an extension of ourselves, just like if you're driving in a car, then that's a tool as well. If you run somebody over with your car on purpose, you don't blame the car, because the car is a tool. But what Stephen Hawking believes is that the car will become independent and run people over by its own will, no matter what you, the driver, have to say about it. Well, I don't know. He was a smart guy. How can I disagree with such a smart guy? But I will say this, that there is a intermediate step that's going to occur, and it's probably going to occur within the next 100 to 200 years in humankind. So it is very possible that the age of humanity is coming to an end, So let's think about this here. There was the age of the dinosaurs, that they evolved and were gigantic, and they were destroyed by a meteorite, they say, and hitting the Yucatan, right? Or then there was the mammals, the small mammals with the warm blood, were able to evolve over hundreds of millions of years until they became the dominant or largely dominant thriving species on Earth, with the birds and the mammals. And then, then came out of that the apes and the humans finally. And I know a lot of people don't believe it, but humans are just fancy apes. They're clever monkeys, if you will. And they really, but when did they actually start really becoming as we are as human beings? Because it's hard to tell, because we can't go back in time and breed with ourselves. But let's just say 50,000 years. If that's a conservative amount of time, because some people think it's 100,000 years. But let's say 50,000 years. So for 50,000 years, human beings walked around in little tribes, little family groups, hunting and gathering for food, and they were smart. They were the smartest of all the creatures on earth, but they were basically just animals. They lived in conjunction with, in balance with nature. They died from every disease. They had no way of curing. They starved when there was no food. They had to move when there was no food. And it went on like that for, 45,000 years or 40,000 years. And then they started to come up with the brilliant idea of agriculture. They started, the dogs were the first animal that they got to use as a pet. And then they used the dogs to hunt with. The dogs probably hung out with them by choice, and then they came together and hunted together, so the dogs were very useful. Then they figured out something like goats and pigeons and so forth were very handy to keep and feed, so that you could fatten them up and then use all their fur and their milk and their meat whenever you needed it, when there was lean times. Then they started growing agriculture. Some people think it was around the Tigris, Euphrates rivers, but there was probably a big culture of sort of a civilization that existed where the Sahara Desert now is. And that's whole nother video if I wanted to pursue that any. Then there was finally, civilization started to occur. Well, about 6,000 years ago to about, 3,000 years ago, and they started to develop writing and mathematics and really around Greece and Mesopotamia and so forth. And then Greece, they became, 600 BC, they started to understand objective science and so forth. And then they went on for, they went through the Roman times and the Middle Ages, and then somewhere about I think it was the 1300s, Gutenberg invented the printing press, which enabled people to massively absorb information over a large time and area. So that was a big move. And then eventually they came up with the Industrial Revolution, which was about 200 years ago. And that wasn't really all that long ago, if you think about it. Because, think about this. I knew my great-grandmother when I was a little kid. I remember her. She was, I think she died when I was 4 or 5, right? And I remember her, and she was born like in the 1850s. So she was like, or 1860s. So she was like 90 years old when she died. And I knew her. And there's a good chance that she knew somebody from 1860 that was born in the 1700s, like in the 1780s or something. So really, that's 3 generations right there. 3 generations of people since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, I can term as man not only became a dominant species, he became a predominant species at that point. All right? And he's been the predominant species. He has overrun the earth. He has used every natural resource on the earth. He's taken but it's all done with culture and science and intelligence that we have. Well, the culture is probably the main driver of it. And then, science is a type of culture. And then the mind of man was always as good as it is now. I mean, it might even have been better long ago because there were less impurities. But now I fear that we are coming to an end on this. The next step, evolution, if you want to call it, it might not even be really true evolution because it doesn't work with genetics, is going to be, as Stephen Hawking feared, AI. But we're not going to be taken over, I don't think, by AI. Like I said, it's a fancy screwdriver. But what their intermediary step is going to be cyborgs. Cyborgs are the beginning of right now. That we're having some. I just watched a video not too long ago about some fellow who was researching bringing back legs that are paralyzed, for example. You can build mechanical legs and put them on the bottom where your broken and twisted legs are, and you can will yourself to walk. The early version of this was they mechanically were able to do it with his fingers and his hands. He had little controls. Then they went to where you can actually think about letting your legs move. I'm going to move my left leg, my right leg, my left leg. And now this is the breakthrough that they've recently had, is they can actually connect the nerves back into the legs so that you can feel your feet on the ground, which is, that's the beginning of cyborgs. Now, Elon Musk, I was watching a video the other day, is talking about being able to cure paralysis based in the spinal cord. Oh, I know what that is. That one statue back there is always falling down. He's able to cure paralysis by putting electrodes along the base of the spine and inside the spine, and so that actually can reconnect the spine's connections all the way to the legs, so that you can use your mind to control your legs again, even though your physical body has been destroyed. Wow, think about that. Well, anyway, then there's also the next step after that would be what they're doing is they're implanting chips in people's ears so that they can hear with the artificial ears. And now they're talking about cybernetic eyes that they're going to put into warriors and so forth that can see in the dark and see different infrared light and so forth. And then they're talking about, these are things that they're just doing now or about to do. Of course, we've got artificial hearts and artificial lungs, that kind of stuff. But the technology is really growing very quickly. And the next step, which I think is the next step that we're going to get to, is very wealthy people may get to the point where they are able to connect their brain onto a completely cybernetic body. So as long as your brain is still alive, then you can have a cybernetic body and have it look just like a human being, but it's all mechanical on the inside, which, like Data on Star Trek, except he doesn't have a human brain. But here's the next step. And this is what one of the things Stephen Hawking is worried about. We are able to digitize all the information that is currently stored in your brain as you are able, instead of having a chemical computer, which is what your brain is, well, we can create chemical computers and download your brain into a chemical computer, and then have that brain into a cyborg body, and then you would not die. And how far away are we from that? I say it's probably less than 100 years. I mean, considering, all we got to do is figure out how to change the information of the human brain into the information of what we understand as computer language right now. And if we can do that, and we can develop a computer that can can store that all in there. But that's the next step. So the implications of that are also class oriented, because who would be able to do that when let's like what's his name, Rupert Murdoch or Bill Gates or one of the great billionaires of the world. He gets to be 95 years old and he says to himself, Warren Buffett's another one, right? And Bill Gates, all these billionaires, Elon Musk too, they say, oh, I'm not ready to check out yet. Some people say, oh, I'd rather not live that long. But on the other hand, when the next day is going to be your last day, then you could say, well, we're going to download your brain now into this computer, and we're going to be able to put your computer brain into a cybernetic body. See, that's the next step. And you think that's so far-fetched. We're pretty close to that right now. The big thing is being able to digitize human memory and so forth, as it's chemically stored now. But if we get to that point and we're across that line, and we're pretty close to it right now, then it'll just develop from there. But the thing is it'll be a class thing. Only the very wealthiest of all people. Well, and it's how would they approach that? You could pick yourself out a body that's perfect, looks perfect. I don't know if you could have how sex would work with this. But you could pick out a body that's perfect and have it, and once you download into it, you can walk all around, you can think all around, and say, well, this body's not perfect. But you would still be alive in some sense. Your mind, your self-awareness, your sentience could be uploaded into the computer, and then you would be the computer man. And the computer does not break like a human body does not age like a human body does. So if you last, let's say you're I don't want to name any names for one example, but one of the great billionaires of the world uploads his mind into a computer 15, 20 years down the road, and that computer, the body he's in may not be a happy body for him for a long time, but once they develop more technology, he can get a better body. Or even, he could have several bodies around the world. So he could have in storage waiting for him. So instead of having to jump on an airplane to fly to Mexico or Australia or something, he could just send his mind through the internet and upload it instantly into a body somewhere on the other side of the world in a matter of seconds. That kind of thing is going in the future. This is the next step. Then we're going to be looking at artificial intelligence beyond that, because what the next step after that is, when these people are walking around for like 100 years, these people that can afford to do that, and they're like hundreds of years old, they might be able to develop a higher brain capacity than the average human being. Now that one there, I have a hard time imagining, and I think it's almost impossible to imagine what a higher brain capacity would be, because your brain can only imagine the brain capacity that it has, but you would be able to understand things that other people could not understand that are living in the world today, because your mind is larger and more complex, and they've built a better brain for you. So that's the next step. I think eventually, in let's say 200-300 years, those types of creatures, whether there be cyborgs or AI or whatever, are going to be in control of the world completely. And that's going to be the ones that everybody else is going to be kind of like their pets. They're secondary creatures on the earth compared to the next step upward. And, I don't know, are they going to say, well, we don't respect you, so we're going to destroy you? Maybe they'll say that. Or chances are, they'll let us live, at least some of us, so that we can live in, but we won't be living in the age of man anymore. It'll be probably a much diminished world. So thank you.